Yo, what is up guys, Ghost here, and today I want to bring you guys all my thoughts on patch 3.2, the good, the bad, and the broken. I've already put out a video with a few first impressions earlier this week, but I really wanted to spend a solid amount of time with the update before doing a full review. Before we begin though, if you enjoy the content, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on any future Battlefield videos. We've got a lot of 3.2 stuff coming up, more helicopter guides will be on the way soon as well. I haven't forgotten about those, so make sure you turn on those notifications. We're ever so close to 40k, so big thank you to everyone who subscribed, and special thanks to GhostGaming for becoming a member and showing some extra support. So the update has been out for the better part of a week now, and whilst the meta has yet to fully evolve, I feel like we've seen enough to know whether this was a good change for the game or not, and also where some of the problems lie. So let's start with the good stuff here, because that's just more fun, and it is mostly good. So overall, I think the class changes are really good. It provides you as a player with much more readability, and you know exactly what you're up against. If you're playing as Assault and you see a support player, you know you need to prioritize that player and that they likely have an SMG. If you're playing in a vehicle, you know to go for the enemy's engineer first. Just yesterday I was playing on Breakaway in a tank, I got hacked, saw a nearby Recon player, and instantly knew that was the guy hacking me. It felt so rewarding just to be able to deduce that by myself without spinning the wheel of fortune and simply going for a random opponent, hoping I kill the right one before I get hacked again. But like I said before, it will take some getting used to. So right now, support feels very powerful, especially Falk. In fact, I would go so far as to say she's probably the best specialist in the game, purely due to her ability to heal herself and others. Med crates are in very high demand as well, because other players, especially recons and engineers, are having to actively seek them out for heals, and even assault players need to resupply their med pens there. Assault is pretty strong too. I really like the med pen changes that makes it activate with less of a delay. It gets you back in the action quicker, although it definitely does feel quite punishing once you've used that med pen if you can't find a support player to drop you a medic box. You are somewhat helpless, and so I do wonder if giving the med pen a slow passive recharge like the Lissiles might be smart. The engineer class feels much more powerful with their newly upgraded anti-vehicle weapons. The M5 launcher is insanely fast now. I mean, I already thought it was fast before, but now it's just really fast, and I believe it does more damage as well. The Javelin is a force to be reckoned with, and maybe even somewhat broken, more on that later in the video, and the Lissiles are just, well, in my opinion, so good that they went a bit too far with the buffs, and I think they need reining in to some degree. Also, having a repair tool equipped all the time is an absolute game changer. I actually had my tank repaired, yes, by 2 engineers at once yesterday, which is an absolute first for me in Battlefield 2042. However, not being able to heal as an engineer is very punishing. It's probably something we've all simply got to get used to. Personally, I always ran Liz with a med crate or a med pen, and that allowed me to be a little bit more aggressive with her. That's simply not the case anymore, and I do find myself playing assault or support for like 80% of the time, and then simply switching to the engineer class to quickly deal with an enemy vehicle before switching back again. Recon is probably my least favorite class, although I am somewhat biased. I've never really been much of a Recon player, but I find their proficiency with sniper rifles just doesn't really make much of a difference to me. I can snipe fine as Recon, but I can also snipe equally as good when I'm not playing Recon. Most of the time I play RAW and hack an enemy vehicle or stick them with a tracer dart. Nobody seems interested in actually locking onto the vehicle and helping out. Casper is still Casper, one of the worst specialists in the game in my opinion. I mean, yeah, sure, he can spot a bunch of people with his drone and you get some cheap assists, but he's just not much fun. And then Pike is still a decent choice, especially giving the insertion beacon as the class gadget, but again, it is quite hard to flank with her when you have no way of healing. Again, this class to me is a situational kind of thing. I might run Pike if I see a good opportunity to sneak an insertion beacon behind enemy lines. I might switch to RAW if an enemy transport heli is all over our team, but again, the rest of the time I'll be playing support or assault. Overall though, I think we are seeing a good distribution of classes throughout the game. I'd say it's something like 35% assault, 35% support, 20% engineer, and 10% recon. Pretty similar to what we've seen in past Battlefield games, really. However, people are still, you know, getting to grips with all the classes. They're experimenting, testing things out, and I'm sure it will take some weeks at least for everybody to acclimatize to the new class system as a whole and a fully fleshed out meta to appear. Now, as for some cool little tidbits they've added with 3.2, I really like the new minimap icons. You've got a new squad leader icon, there's a new icon for the EOD bot I think as well, and the scoreboard has seen a lot of great changes too, like showing who's dead or alive, as well as how many of each class there are. Some people have reported that mouse input feels better, some people say that's just a placebo and it's exactly the same, but at least it doesn't seem to have gotten any worse. There's also a new direction of fire indicator, so it used to be this almost semicircle with a small arrow pointing to the direction of fire, and now it's more of a single solid line. Personally, I like it because it allows your eyes to focus in on that point faster and sort of quickly deduce where the fire is coming from, but it just somehow doesn't look very pretty. Now, I would have normally put this next thing under the bad section, the ADS nerf while using drum magazines and extended mags that I detailed in my last video, but I'm going to list this under the good stuff now because we learned during DICE's livestream yesterday that they have heard us loud and clear, we don't like this change, and they are therefore going to roll it back. No date yet when this is going to happen, but you can at least rest easy knowing it will be reverted. They did mention that they do plan to tune the drum mags and the extended mags somehow though, but they're going back to the drawing board with it. They also mentioned that the longer sprint to fire time noticed by some members of the community is actually an unintended bug, so that too will be fixed at some point. So the highly anticipated thermal scopes have finally made it into the game, and they're pretty darn good, I have to say. I spent quite a while using one of these on the PP29 and I do feel like they're almost a little too good. You can identify enemies in so many situations where you otherwise wouldn't be able to, and they have unlimited range on them. The only drawback is that you can't see the environmental surroundings. They can be blocked by player thrown smokes but not environmental smoke, and it's not quite as easy to track a moving target. But for honing in on campers and stationary targets, things like that, they're absolutely amazing. So if you haven't gotten one of these in your plus menu for your weapon of choice, you're doing something wrong. Honestly, I feel they might want to rebalance these scopes by nerfing the range of them a little bit, especially the lower magnification scope, which is for like the SMGs and weapons like that. I don't think the range to them should be absolutely endless. Alright, let's touch on vehicles a bit here because they've all seen some nice changes too. So the jets had their AGM missiles buffed, definitely a nice little change there that gives them some much needed firepower against tanks on the ground. Helicopters, and especially the Nightbird, I found are much more weighty than they were pre-patch. I'm not sure what they did exactly because this was a stealth change and it wasn't in the update notes, but overall they do feel much nicer to fly, although you will have to raise your sensitivity a little bit to compensate for the added weight. But it is arguably the tanks that have seen the biggest buff. So the turret turn speed has been increased across the board for all tanks. They've also had APS added, which is absolutely invaluable, especially against heavy hitting munitions like the Javelin, and of course you're much more likely to actually get repaired by your teammates now, since every engineer has a repair tool. So overall these changes allow you to be a bit more aggressive whilst pushing an objective, and tanks are starting to become a little less campy and a bit more pushy, which I think is definitely a good thing. Okay, so with that said, let's now move on to the bad and the broken stuff, because there is a fair amount of that present as well. So firstly, there is a bug on controllers to do with the new button mapping that causes players to switch weapons when trying to open the plus system. So I believe you hold Y or triangle to open the plus system and you tap it to switch weapon, and when players are holding it down, for some reason it's both opening the plus system and changing weapons simultaneously. I don't play on controller myself and I haven't tested this, but this is just what I've heard from other players, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but nevertheless, something DICE need to get sorted ASAP. The M39 EMR Vault weapon is incredibly broken now as well. Normally it's a 3-shot body kill and a 2-shot head kill, but if you equip the silencer, for some reason it becomes a 2-shot body kill and a 1-shot head kill up to silly ranges. This has to be unintended, right? Why would putting on a silencer do this to your weapon? It just makes no sense. As far as I know, DICE haven't commented on this yet, so what's going on there, DICE? And on the subject of vault weapons, this update adds 3 new additions to the game that are no exception to the rest of the pack. In keeping with tradition, they are just worse than all the other guns in the game. The PP2000 is accurate enough with its slower rate of fire, but the time to kill is just way too low. The MTAR is a 900 rate of fire beast with tons of spread that is very inaccurate at even medium ranges that you would therefore expect to slaughter enemies with at shorter ranges, but no, its TTK is just too long for all of its drawbacks. And well, the M39, whilst at the moment it's kind of OP because of a bug, overall the weapon handling is just atrocious. The recoil is insane, the bullet velocity is bananas. I mean, I shit you not, I have to lead targets that are 20 meters away from me. And if you try to go toe to toe with an enemy sniper, you will die because the bullet drop is just way higher than any of the base Battlefield 2042 guns as well. I don't really get why DICE keep releasing vault weapons like this. They're almost always worse than the other guns in the game. They have worse handling, smaller magazines, no tier 1 skin to unlock. Like, where is my incentive to use them outside of nostalgia? Okay, now before we end, I want to touch on 2 of the more controversial gadgets in the game. Firstly, the Javelin missile. So the Javelin missile has 2 firing modes. It can lock onto ground vehicles, fire in a slight arc and do a decent amount of damage. However, if a Recon player has placed a tracer dart somewhere, it can lock onto that tracer dart, fire its missile directly up into the air and then have it land vertically and do a top-down attack for additional damage. The tracer dart can of course stick to anything: ground vehicles, air vehicles, infantry players, and even terrain, allowing the Javelin user to also lock onto anything. Furthermore, at the moment, the Javelin user can lock onto these tracer darts without even having line of sight, so he can lock you through cover, behind a building, terrain, you name it. So if you get hit by a tracer dart, first of all, you have no idea it's there. You will then hear a lock-on warning sound from the Javelin user, and again, you have no idea that this is a Javelin. So my first instinct in a helicopter would probably be to take cover behind a building or some terrain and try to line of sight the lock-on, but unfortunately if it's a tracer darted Javelin missile, there is just nothing you can do about it. There is no way to stop the lock-on or the missile, and you will be one-shotted unless you can get underneath some cover like a bridge and have the missile impact there. Now I know these situations don't happen a lot, right? Most of the time I have a Javelin equipped, nobody is using tracer darts. Whenever I play Recon and tracer dart a tank, nobody's using the Javelin. But what this does is allows a couple of friends playing together, for example, and I know many of you saw this in Jack's video, to completely troll and cheese the enemy team. How many of you remember the tank in BF4 with the guided shell and the SOFLAM passenger seat? You didn't see it often, but when a few players teamed up in one of those things, they were absolutely unstoppable and it was just stupid broken. So personally, I think the Javelin should only be able to lock a tracer dart with line of sight, just like the M5 recoilless on a SOFLAM. It could also be that this is an unintended bug and DICE are planning to fix it, but somehow I think this is part of the design. Now let's touch on the Lissiles here. These missiles have had their range and agility increase so much that they are now able to make several passes at the same target before dying. You can literally just throw a missile up into the air without having a target and scout around the entire map looking for something to blow up. These missiles already had an insane range of 450 meters before the buff, and now they can travel 600. I'm going to show you some clips here and you tell me if they seem fair or not. In my opinion, a missile that can one-shot a Nightbird, a stealth heli, and two-shot an attack heli should be a one-shot chance and you're done. You know, if you miss your TV missile, you missed it. You don't get to come back around 4 or 5 times and perpetually pester that vehicle with a single missile that will have recharged in about 15 seconds, or you can simply kill yourself and respawn with another 2. Now, I know a lot of console players had problems with controlling the Lissiles pre-patch, and that was actually due to a bug that DICE fixed in update 3.2, which is great, but I think a lot of players are confusing that bug being fixed with the buffs to the missile. The bug fix to allow controller players better control over the missile is fantastic, don't get me wrong, but the buffs to the missile overall were completely unwarranted, and it was already very, very good once you actually put in a little practice with it. So overall here, there will be a few growing pains for all of us in update 3.2, but on the whole, I think it's a very positive thing for Battlefield 2042. Now, if you want to become a better helicopter pilot and dodge those pesky missiles, go and check out this video. There'll be a lot more videos to come in that series, so stay tuned. And if you wish to further support the channel, then perhaps consider becoming a member like these awesome guys here. Thank you for watching today, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.